Dr. Combs' class. This is my presentation on the concept of interdisciplinary learning. Within this presentation, I won't only be explaining the concept and background of interdisciplinary learning, but also how you as educators can utilize it within your classrooms. Basically, it's a strategy that educators can utilize to teach students how to create connections that exist among content areas. And basically, the teacher will take a topic that's connected to some standard, and then they'll choose a disciplinary area to focus on. I'll explain more about this later in the presentation, but basically the students not only learn about the content that they're teaching, but they also create connections to other content. But first I'm going to explain the history of interdisciplinary learning. So it was first used around the late 18th century, where John Dewey, who was an educational theorist who came up with a lot of the strategies still utilized within the classrooms today, he came up with a concept and applied it to his classroom, and how he believed that education should be taught. Now, a woman named Hilda Tabba then built upon Dewey's ideas, not only incorporating her classroom, but grew it to something better. Prior to the 1960s, the educational system did not change too drastically. Basically, it still went around the concept that the teacher would lead everything and the students would just sit there and pay attention. However, whenever Ms. Hilda applied this concept in interdisciplinary learning to her classroom, in the 1960s, more or less, in the 70s, people really started backlashing, and it was basically caused because there's two different political sides to the educational system. Some people believe that the prior 1960s method was much more efficient and appropriate. However, many other theorists believe that this interdisciplinary learning created a lot of open-minded connections within the learning. However, they believed it did change pretty drastically and it was without structure. Interdisciplinary learning is very important, especially in the everyday classroom, because after the 1960s, when more structure was added to the concept in the system and it was applied to more classrooms, studies show that students would better understand the material and increase their critical thinking skills and cognitive development. To utilize the concept of interdisciplinary learning within the everyday classroom, teachers must first develop a content area and then apply skills and thinking processes and then finally develop an assessment. Now first, with the content area, teachers must first decide what learning standard they want to complete through their interdisciplinary learning. Then this method will build off of the standard for student learning. After the teacher picks a content area or a standard to apply interdisciplinary learning to, they will then create a skills and thinking process, and this is the basis behind the lesson. This is the backbone behind the lesson. So after the teacher creates this content, they will then step back and develop substandards that can be applied and fulfilled with the interdisciplinary learning concept. After the teacher shows a content area and taught the lesson, the next step would be assessment. Now, assessment is not based upon worksheets or homework or basically busy work that forces the children to do something they may or may not be good at. And teachers may not be able to truly understand if the students understand the content or not. So the teacher will begin a classroom discussion, and if they ask the correct questions, the concept is they will then be able to tell if the students understand it well or not. After the content area has been taught, the next step is assessment. Now, teachers throughout the classroom discussion will ask more important questions besides yes, no, true, or false. They'll ask why type of questions or how type of questions. This involves higher cognitive thinking because students will then have to take the content area and apply it to different areas that they have learned previously or will learn. Now, this doesn't only have to be through a classroom discussion, though. Sometimes teachers will give this as an essay format, more or less. The students then will be able to write down their thoughts, and they don't have to think about it on the spot for the classroom discussion. When all of these strategies are utilized correctly and interdisciplinary learning is used within the classroom appropriately, the students can learn a whole lot more than just simply hearing the content and doing a homework assignment about it. They can create connections. They can apply it to everyday world. They can apply it to other lessons. It truly makes the students have to think a lot harder and improve their cognitive development. Here are my references for my presentation. Thank you again for watching it. I hope you can apply interdisciplinary learning within your everyday classroom.